We're covering the section of verses from chapter 6, verse 19 through the end of the chapter, where Jesus is talking about wealth and worry, focuses and priorities and anxieties, all those fun things. So we've been talking about, obviously, the kingdom of heaven with this and how it affects different areas of life, relationships, personal righteousness, and this is how should the kingdom of heaven inform how I look at the rest of my life? And I saw one author actually suggested that this sort of seems to break it down in the way that we usually think of as religious and secular, and shows that there's not as much of a distinction between those as we usually think. As we think, our work and finances and all those kinds of things that we do, that's separate from maybe our spiritual or religious life. But Jesus is showing here, no, even the way that we approach life with our priorities, our focus, and what we aspire to do in this life, all of that is spiritual and under the domain of the kingdom of heaven as well. So going through this, we talked about most of the first section of, where is your heart? What's your focus? What are your priorities? And we're going to pick up with question number 5. I want to go ahead and read this section, and I want to read all of it so that we can see it as its full context here. And I'll go ahead and do that so somebody else doesn't have to read all of it. So let's all be at Matthew chapter 6, and we'll start in verse 19. And Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? And no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his lifespan? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." Okay, so we went through the beginning of that, looking at this idea of treasures, and where you are putting your effort and storing up those treasures is where your heart is going to be anchored. And we talked about this idea of the eye as the lamp of the body, and sort of left off with some of those ideas, and we talked about that this darkness that we're identifying here in verse 23 is this focus on earthly treasures. And so we said that could be materialism about stuff. It could be, a focus on success and prestige here in this life, but it is that focus on earthly things. So I want to ask a follow-up question to that. So we said that the darkness was a focus on earthly treasures, materialism, success, and all that. What does the word darkness imply that kind of focus is going to do to us? What effect is darkness going to have?
Keeps us from the light of God.
Keeps us from the light of God. So it clouds things, it darkens them. And we could go from that to this metaphor of the eye. It keeps us from seeing clearly. So darkness, it clouds us from seeing God's light, clouds our vision, it blinds us in the sense of we can't see clearly. Maybe there's something else too. So he says the darkness is in us. What else might that be talking about? Greg?
If you're looking for things to satisfy the eye, you might choose to try to defraud others. You might choose to not take care of your family and gamble your resources in the hope of being rich someday. I mean, there's a lot of things you can choose that would be just running an unlawful business in order to capitalize on your seeking for wealth and adding to your own pocketbook. There's lots of things, lots of vehicles you can use that are going to be pathways to darkness as you try to enrich yourselves.
Yeah. And so that's the idea of, darkness being in us and the links that it can drive us to fulfill our focus and our priorities if it's on that darkness, right? And so we kind of see that darkness is implying this idea that it'll keep us from seeing clearly, for one, right? We won't be able to see, and also that darkness is going to fill us. So think about that. Jesus says if we have a focus or priority set on this world, the stuff in it and the experiences and all the stuff that goes with that, then we are not going to be able to see clearly. And we'll be full of darkness. I don't know if I had pieced it together that way before going through it this time, but Jesus is saying, if that is our focus, if we're putting all of our time and energy into stuff here, then we're not even going to be able to see clearly. It's going to get in the way of us being able to see God's light and to understand things. It's going to fill us with a darkness. And so then I had a follow-up question of if, a vision set on treasure in this world fills us with darkness, and Greg was touching on this, how might we expect to see that manifested in people's lives? Do I need to repeat that? Yeah. Well, you had it right in your ear,
Right,
so,
like
yeah. It's been a fun day in the Riffle household, I'll just say that. So if we're talking about this vision set on earthly treasures, treasures of this world, fills us with darkness, what sort of results in the lives of people might we expect to see, if that is the case? How is that going to manifest?
I think it would show us that they, by their not obeying God's will, the darkness has filled their hearts and they're not visualizing on God's word.
So they're going to be, consumed with all kinds of godless things, right? And that might be extreme examples like Greg was talking about of defrauding people and doing illegal things for sordid gain and all of that. Does it always have to be that extreme, though?
Just be jealousy is your own pursuits are not fulfilled. You become jealous of others that have a fluid lifestyle.
Yeah. Jealousy, I think it could even be comparison culture, where if I'm just trying to get everything in this life, and I'm saying, well, what do they have, and what do they have, and I need to get some of that, and I need to get some of that. And people are not even able to recognize that that's going on because the darkness has clouded their eyes. I think we really need to think about that sometimes of when we're talking to people and we're interacting with them, that they might not even have the capability at this point of seeing that. That when we are all in this life and trying to get by and run the rat race and do all that, we're like an animal with blinders on and you can't see anything else. Which is really interesting. So I want to look at some words of Jesus pretty closely here. So look at verse 23, and we're going to look at the end of it. He says, "But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness," that's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because light and darkness are not the same thing. So if what is sort of, you think, illuminating you and allowing you to see is actually darkness, there's this irony of you think you can see, but you can't. And I think that is what Jesus is pointing to. A lot of the world is in that situation. He says later, these are the things that the Gentiles or the nations seek after. This is the mindset that most people are in. And so we better not be in that mindset, right? We should know better. Not be clouded and full of this kind of darkness. Greg?
There's a way to kind of put a little science to this that actually makes sense.
Science or sinus?
Science.
Okay.
If the light is not of the wavelengths of pure light, you'll see different things. Like if you are using a dark light, a black light, you might see things that are not visible in bright white light. So if the light in you is darkness, it's basically, you've got a filter on your vision. That because only certain wavelengths are getting through, you're going to see things completely different than you otherwise would see.
Yeah. Sunday morning we talked about how for them the lamp was, a very straightforward illustration. For us, we might think of like a lens. Like I have glasses on and they help me to see things a certain way. If I take these glasses off, I can't see you at all. And so Jesus is saying that this focus, this priority, it changes how you see things. So we talk about lenses, or maybe we have the phrase of wearing your rose-colored glasses or things like that. And that's what Jesus is talking about, is it puts a different lens on life. You see things a different way. It's going to affect your perception. And so if you think everything is about earthly success and trying to measure things by how successful in that way you are, then that's going to lead you down a path Jesus is warning us here. So I thought that was really interesting that he sort of draws this attention to the darkness and its implications there. Did anybody have any comments about that before we really jump into 5 here? Joy, yeah.
I kind of thought that you were asking for indicators a little bit ago about how you might guess that a person is thinking or seeing in darkness. And I was thinking about what a person might be talking about a lot, what their topic is always back to this. So that kind of indicates what their priority is or where their focus is. And not, I'm saying they, also looking back at myself.
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to ask some follow-up questions about that exact thing when we get to 5 here of, what are some indicators? Yeah, with this follow-up here, I just kind of wanted to talk about what sort of results or manifestations might we see or expect with that. But yeah, we'll talk about indicators or red flags here in a second. So looking at number 5, so Jesus makes this abundantly clear. He says it is impossible to be devoted to God and devoted to wealth. So that is clear. He says, no one can serve 2 masters. And then at the end of verse 24, he says, you cannot serve God and money. Do we actually believe that, though? I mean, let's get real and open and transparent. Do we really believe that? Because a lot of us maybe try, right, to have a foot in both doors. So I want to talk about the fact, do we actually believe that this is true in reality? Don't point at anybody else, just look at yourself. That's what we're going for here.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Money is amoral. I mean, it really is. It will make you more of who you already are. If you're unhappy, stingy, it'll make you more unhappy, more stingy. Just like the guy on your show that couldn't eat his fish. It gets you to where you freak out. But if you're generous and giving and sharing, it just gives you opportunity to do more of that.
That brings up the idea in 1 Timothy where Paul talks about the love of money being the root of all kinds of evil, not itself. So, I mean, with what Aaron says, yeah, it's true. Obviously, Jesus said it. It's an absolute maxim that he lays out here. But sometimes there's a difference between I know it's true because Jesus said it right here, and then how I actually go about living that in my everyday life. So that's where I kind of want us to think about is, do I actually, in reality, in the way that I'm living my life, believe that this is a true statement? That I cannot serve God and the world at the same time? Margaret. Yeah.
And when we look at it as service, but you can look at it as being, devoted. The word serve has so many meanings. And I think that it's your devotion to, your interest in, obviously, what you do.
Yeah.
Your attitude toward it, whether you worship it, you love it, or it is just a means of providing what you need and being able to help other people. Obviously, the way you use it, but how you think about it.
Yeah.
And how you feel about it is one of the keys to me of whether you serve or serve you.
Yeah, so the idea of service, I actually want to piggyback off what Margaret is talking about here. So most of our English versions are going to have, you cannot serve God and money. You cannot serve two masters. And if you were to look up that word just in a dictionary, it'll give you probably a couple possibilities. And one of them is going to be serve, and the other is to be a slave to something. So you look it up, and it's actually a word based off of the word slave. So I think that really sharpens what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about God and money as two slave masters. And it does not make sense that you would try to be a slave of one person and a slave of another. You can't do that. If you're a slave to this one, you belong to this one. And it is impossible for you then to also be a slave over here, because then your loyalty is divided. And you're not actually fulfilling your obligation as a slave over here. And we don't like that, right? But that was a part of their everyday lives that they saw, this idea of slavery. So you cannot serve two different masters and be a faithful servant, and be a faithful slave, is what Jesus is saying here. It wouldn't make sense. So then the question in parentheses is, which one are you going to serve? You're going to serve one of them. Which is it going to be? And when I look at it like that, it seems to cut through a lot of the nonsense that I or maybe other people come up with as excuses to this, right? Well, I can spend a little bit more time over here and make sure that I'm getting all of these things ready and in line, and being successful and prosperous in these areas. And Jesus says you can't be a slave to two different people. So I had a couple hands up, but I don't. Jim.
Yeah, trying to serve God and mammon or money, using the knowledge, that's like trying to ride two horses at the same time going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
It will tear, and it won't be your shirt. See, God never comes next. He comes first, and he's not there at all.
Yeah. So thank you for that image, first off, of the tearing. But yeah, that's kind of the idea of it. It is two separate things, and they both want all of you. So which one are you going to serve? Because you can't do both. But I think that's a struggle for a lot of us, especially in this day and age. Just a sort of a tiny little example. So we got our tax return back, right? And I got a lot more than that. Usually I get raked over the coals. But this time, child credits or whatever, you get some back. And I automatically start thinking, well, if I put this in the savings, how's it going to increase, my monthly dividends? Because we have a high yield savings account and all this kind of stuff. And that is where my mind went automatically. And then I started thinking about how we've talked about people having those kingdom funds, right? Because if I didn't get that tax return, was it not going to help? Was it going to hurt me? No, we would have been okay. But automatically I start thinking about, what can I get out of this? And how much more money can I make off of it? And that was like, oh, okay, I don't like that. That was my first thought. It's going to increase my dividends by like $30 a month or something like that on the high yield savings. And maybe that's worth it over helping somebody else. And those are, I think, kind of some of the attitudes. I didn't even say that to my wife yet, so she's hearing all this for the first time today too. So I'm sure we'll have some conversations in the car about what we're going to do with that. But I think sometimes we internally believe that we can serve both of them, at least in this country. And Jesus says you cannot be half in the kingdom of God and half in the kingdom of the world. It doesn't make sense. So then, with what we're talking about, Aaron, do you have your hand up, or is that a thinking thing?
Just just kind of curious. So with this scripture, you have successful business people that wind up very wealthy.
Yeah.
So you say you can't serve both. But I know a lot of very wealthy men that are very godly men. So I think you can be successful and godly. And it comes down to where is your, it's like everything we've talked about from verse 1. It's where's your heart.
Yeah.
I talked to a friend of mine years ago that sold his company, did really well. And we talked through what that did. And he said, it didn't change me. I'm still the same guy I was. It just, I have a different net worth now. And able to do lots of great things for people. Has lots of nice stuff, but able to do lots of great things. There's a trend with HVAC owners that have grown big business and been successful, that they post pictures on their private jets and buy their fancy cars, and you look at that, and, and they pictures of their big man caves with the 6 cars and the Bentleys and Ferraris and what other fancy name for car there is. Again, I'm not a car guy, but and I see that, and it's just sad because that's where their treasure is.
Yeah.
It is every bit on this earth.
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point. I think we've kind of been assuming it, but you could also ask, from these verses, is it wrong to have a savings account? It's the same kind of thing.
We better hope not.
Yeah, I mean, but then we got to bring in the ideas of stewardship, and where's your heart? Where's your focus and your actual affections? That's the idea of heart. What are your true affections on? Is it on God, or is it trying to, push that dollar sign up, right? And sometimes you can see that expressed by people's Facebook pages or whatever it is. Sometimes it's not as obvious. But stewardship is one thing of being responsible and faithful with what God has given me. And that's going to look different for different people, right? So I've got Liz and then Salem.
We were watching The Chosen last night at Mom and Dad's, and we were talking, and I don't remember what the exact comment was, but it was like, in today's world, we have people who, they don't make idols. They we don't carve little images and worship them. And I was like, well, we do.
Yeah.
It just looks a little different. Instead of, carving a little picture of what we imagine Baal looks like, we worship our Facebook feed and all of our fans who like us, or we glorify all of the savings accounts that we have, and we say, look at my net worth, and we buy fancy things to show off instead of to use for beneficial means.
Yeah. So I think, our idolatry, I think, is turned more toward ourself and toward ideas now instead of being little statues, right? Our idols are me and, these concepts or abstract ideas that I aspire to, whatever my idea of success or, having made it or arrived or, the American dream can very easily become what we're talking about, right? All of that kind of stuff. Salem, what were you going to say?
One of the things that I was kind of thinking of was the word pursuit.
Pursuit,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's I know people that have quite literally spent their entire life pursuing success and wealth and money, and they have it, and you can have that without necessarily totally pursuing that. And I think you can stumble into success, or I think you can, glorify God through your job and gain success through that as well. But I think pursuing that with your whole heart is what this is talking about. The word devoted is something too. Where are you devoted to that, or are you devoted to God? Which way are you going?
Because devoted is almost the idea of worship. Where are your heart affections? What are you devoted to down? This is off the top of my head, so I might be completely wrong, so don't quote me. I think that word devoted might even be off of the idea of the guts. Usually we think of the heart, they would use the word for guts. And that might be off of that, but I might be thinking of something else that I studied today, so don't quote me, okay? But it is about those deep affections, right? So with what Joy was bringing up several minutes ago, what ways maybe can we recognize this tendency in ourselves then? Ashley?
Well, I think a silent killer can be, men can say that they're successful, or women, but what are you giving up? Like, what
Yeah.
are you willing to sacrifice? Is it time with your wife, time with your children, time with your grandchildren? Are you truly being successful? What are you truly devoted to?
So we could state that another way, like what we were talking about a few moments ago. What things have you sacrificed on the idol of success, or the altar of success, right? If you kind of look at that, of what have I given up to get to that point, yeah, that can be an indicator. What else, Chip?
I don't think that having items is necessarily wrong, but
Right.
people should be economically responsible. You know what I mean? It's okay if you have a Bentley or Benz or whatever, but you probably should try to at least get to the 200,000 miles. On that engine.
Use it, not just.
Because you got to think that all this stuff does have an effect on God's creation. So
Does stewardship
think
again.
About,
Yeah.
think about 20 years ago when there was a super big TVs. People were probably like, "Yo, I bought a brand new TV," bragging about it. Now we'd be like, "You have an old TV, it's nothing." But you got to
Yeah.
think all those TVs ended up on the side of the curb.
Yeah.
It's not good for the environment, and it's not good when you're bragging about the things you own to other people. I don't even know how it would even come up in a conversation you're at HVAC thing, and they're like, "Yo, check out my brand new car, man."
I bet it's probably exactly like that, yeah.
Not to mention my $3,000 phone that I'm showing you this picture of. It keeps on compacting, to where you're not talking about God to anybody, or at that point, or even talking about your family. You're just talking about what you guys have, right?
Yeah, I think you're bringing up that idea of stewardship again. Yeah, if I'm trading out my Ferrari for the new model every year, that was just an example off the top of my head. I don't
that
know.
can
Yeah.
that still could be economically smart, because you're not losing money, you're not destroying something that's still getting used by someone else. But if you have 5 of them and only 2 of them get driven, and maybe one of them gets driven once a year, why do you even need that, right?
So Jay Leno is just rolling over right now as a result of it. Joy, what were you going to say?
How tricky, especially money, can be, because, there's a certain amount of it that we probably need to survive.
Right.
But we can't deceive ourselves in saying to ourselves, I don't think a lot of money. And we can continue that when we're really deceiving ourselves about how much interest we have in money. And the nail is, we may be deceiving other people or not. We may be deceiving ourselves, but we're not deceiving God.
Yeah.
And that's really the nail to me.
So are you kind of bringing up the idea of just a little bit more sort of thing, or?
I'm just saying that denial.
Okay.
There's denial, and we can say that we don't have idols, and we're not, we have everything in line and appear that to others or not. But the bottom line is, we can deceive ourselves, we can deceive other people, but we're not deceiving God.
Yeah, that's true, absolutely. I mean, the master knows. So one thing we need to think about with this too is you don't have to be rich for this to be a sin. I mean, for one thing, in this country, we are just filthy rich compared to everybody else. The poorest person in this country, I've seen figures before of just how many times richer they are than somebody in poverty in, sub-Saharan Africa. It is just embarrassing. But you don't have to have a ton of money for this to be a problem. And so one of the ways that I see that creep up in my own life is, say I have to get some new vacuum cleaner, whatever it is. And I am just obsessing about, I've got to get the perfect vacuum cleaner, and it's taking all of my time and my affections because somehow I think if I get the perfect vacuum cleaner, it's going to fix all of my problems. And that might be a silly example, but don't we do that all the time? I've heard the phrase predatory shopping before, of where I'm going to scour the entire internet to find the one right thing that's going to make my life all better.
Consumer Reports really helps.
Yeah, Consumer Reports. So there's another one of me out here. Yeah.
Buy the first one, throw it away if it didn't work.
Is that what you do with your Bentleys and stuff too? But yeah, that you don't have to be rich for this to be a problem. And there is obviously that narrative in our country now that the rich are the cause of all the evils and things like that. And we need to make sure that we're not just putting all the things on them. They're the ones that have all those problems, not me. But when I can have Amazon deliver something to my house the next day, that doesn't help. I mean, there are a lot of ways for this to manifest. So obsession over things, I think, is another. Jeff, you had your hand up.
Proverbs 30, verse 7 through 9 kind of go along with what we've been talking about, or what you just mentioned. 2 things I ask of you, O Lord, do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you, and say, who is the Lord? For I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God.
Yeah, absolutely. So it points out the two extremes, and hopefully we fall somewhere in the middle, right, of having what we need, but not having too much. Greg?
It's challenging to have this conversation in 2026 because he says, don't be anxious for your life. So this is the one who's got to choose between serving material things and serving God. But the hinge point here is, do I have enough to drink?
Yeah.
Clean water's pretty cheap. It's called a faucet. Do I have enough to eat? And do I have enough to clothe myself from the elements?
Mm-hmm.
There's no mention of a car here. There's no mention of all this other stuff we've been talking about. And if that alone was enough to cause anxiety and hang-up in people's lives, as to prevent them from devoting themselves to God, are we talking about enough food to eat to the end of the week?
Yeah.
Enough food for the end of the month? Enough food for the end of the year? There was once a foolish man who had big barns full of food, and he couldn't store any more food, so his solution was to build more barns. But he didn't have a big 6-car garage, and he didn't have all this stuff.
You could have had carriages. We don't know.
It's just to try to put us in the framework of the people to whom Matthew was addressing here is pretty challenging. And I would say one of the biggest areas that, as I'm getting older, we think about is my anxiety over, well, what happens when I don't work and I don't have a job? What happens when I go to retirement? Am I going to have to eat? Am I going to have to drink? Am I going to have to clothe myself? I've got 4 kids that probably wouldn't let me starve to death. I'm not sure. One of them might. But at least I think the other 3 would probably take me in if I had to. And the point is, folks are being anxious over just having enough to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get all this luxury stuff. And I think you've got to kind of back away from this a little bit and think about basic survival. God says don't even allow concerns over basic survival to interfere with your commitment to Christ.
Yeah, when he's talking to poor Jewish peasants in the countryside on a hill somewhere, that really puts it into perspective of, if they're not to worry, then what's our excuse, right? Okay, Jeff?
It's interesting to read or watch hospice doctors or nurses and what they say, the patients say when they're nearing death and what truly is important in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's friends, family, spirituality, these types of things. But you never hear somebody in hospice say, it was that new car,
Yeah. Or I've also read people will never say, I wish I had worked more, or something like that, right? Yeah. Yeah, it really puts it into perspective. And so I guess, what's the solution to all that then? So we've talked about the danger, and we've talked about, some possible red flags or indications for if it's in us, but what's the solution to guarding against this?
Put God first.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is the thing, consciously choosing, not just thinking it's going to be a default, but consciously choosing the kingdom of God as our priority. And realizing that everything else that we do in our family, in our jobs, whatever they are, begins with that foundation and not the other way around. We have to make a conscious decision to align our loyalties primarily with God's kingdom first and let everything else stem out from there. And that can help to clear our priorities a little bit and give us some perspective. Zach, what were you going to say?
I'm going to trust more that God will always still provide for me.
Yeah.
And having that mindset and just, because like we talked about, if we're focusing on, I want to be able to have all this stuff, it's like, we're focused about eating, having the essentials. I'm very blessed. A lot, like you said, all of us are very blessed. But I feel like God is always going to take care of me. I believe that. And believing that is going to allow you to feed into that more every day to say, you know what, today was a bad day, but God has still given me all these blessings, and He's still letting me have this roof over my head. He's letting me feed my children, all these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, I had put also gratitude and contentment. Being more thankful for what I have and actually content with it. Because sometimes I start feeling that itch, well, if I just had this, or if things like this were different, or maybe I get a new one of these, And again, it doesn't have to be big stuff. Just little stuff, somehow thinking that changing earthly circumstances is going to make it all better, is a lot of this attitude, this worry that we're talking about. So yeah, I think gratitude and contentment is huge. Somebody, I'll go Jeff then Chip. Oh, Chip then Jeff.
I was going to say that Jesus, when He sent out His disciples with their coin purse, He didn't say, like, you should only have silver coins in your coin purse. They could have carried all the full bag of gold, right? But the thing is that they were going to visit with other people. They were socializing. They were talking about God. Yeah, they're going to need money to survive during that, but all they need is their clothes on their back and shoes and connections to be taken out of the elements and stuff like that.
Yeah, because He actually said, don't take that stuff. I think part of it is because it would distract them, maybe, and part of it was because they needed to trust that God was going to take care of them on this kingdom mission, this mission from God. And so that is a big thing. Okay, so, Jeff, almost forgot.
I just think sometimes it takes some intense prayer sessions too.
Yeah.
My heart tends to go directions it shouldn't go sometimes, so it really needs those prayer sessions to be brought back into where the heart needs to be.
It takes intentionality, yeah. I realize sometimes, there'll be things that I essentially pray about every day because I know that they're that big of a problem for me. And I'll maybe miss one day because my schedule gets flipped around or something. And guess what? I have a really hard time with it that day because I have to be intentional and have to keep doing this as part of my foundation for life, right? Okay, so let's look at number 6 here. So we've talked about it sort of generally, but talking about more of the dangers to be on the lookout for. In what ways can the danger of materialism be particularly urgent in our time and place? So we're going to say a couple things, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up question I won't reveal it yet, actually. So it's a surprise follow-up question. But in what ways can the danger of materialism, or just what Jesus is talking about, if you wouldn't word it that way, how is that particularly urgent for us today? Ashley.
I feel like we are a microwave society in which we aren't very patient about things. if there's something that they want on Amazon or something, that they kind of put it in their cart and then, think about it more. And I think if they had a certain number of days, that if they're still like, yeah, that would be good, then they go ahead and get it. So they purposely slow things down. I
Yeah.
really like that.
Yeah, the microwave convenience society, and if we lose that convenience, then we notice that we lack contentment, right? Like, oh man, I can't believe that, our Wi-Fi was out for a good chunk of the morning because I guess somebody in Shelbyville cut a wire somewhere, and downstream, everybody that had gigabit now was just out of it. And part of it was, I really need to get some work done, and I've got all this on my computer, right? And then I was intentionally thinking about how much of this is just a convenience and a comfort thing. Because if I've got my Bible and pen and paper, I should be okay, right? But it can affect all kinds of things. So what other ways can this be a really urgent danger?
We're just bombarded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's everywhere. Marketing, influencers, all of that. There's a question that I get really tired of hearing. So usually Shepard and I are either in the car, something's on the TV or whatever, and he hears a commercial, and he says, Dad, why do they say that you can fly, if you buy this thing? And the marketing is really getting him of, oh, we should get that because then all this stuff is going to happen in our lives. So why do they say all of that? And I just get tired of saying over and over, they want you to think it's cool so you'll buy it. And it made me just realize how much pressure there is everywhere because I'm used to it, and it's a new thing for him because he's learning how to conversate and listen and all of that. But it is just absolutely everywhere. You can't do anything without some kind of marketing influence somewhere. And so we need to guard against that because realizing that there is a pressure, there is a strategy to try to get us to align our affections with things and experiences and achievements in that way. So we have to realize that we live in a really materialistic culture that's trying to drive that. And I'll say one thing is the underlying message with a lot of this that we're talking about in our society is that you can't be happy and have a fulfilling life if you don't have these things. That's what the message is. That you can't be happy, you can't have a fulfilling life if you don't have this product or you don't partake in this experience or whatever it is. So the follow-up question that we're going to pick up with on Sunday is how does the gospel or the Sermon on the Mount in particular respond to that? The idea of you cannot be happy and fulfilled if you don't have these things. How does the gospel respond to that? So think about that and we'll talk about it on Sunday. Any questions before we end? Okay, thank you.